Stories generally have some sort of structure to them, and then this is an example of probably the most common structure that stories use. So whether it's a commercial, whether it's a news story, whether it's a comic book, whether it's a book, movie, Netflix type show, TV show, whatever, is stories, they generally use some sort of format similar to this. And then what we need to understand in film class is we need to understand the basics here, and we need to be able to design stories like this. So designing the rising action and then get a climax and the falling action, we need to be able to do that. And then just know that once we understand the basics and can do things like this, and just like with anything, when there's certain rules, then you can kind of stretch the rules, but you need to understand the basics first. So once we understand these basics and we can accomplish these, then you can kind of bend that around a little bit, because not all stories will always follow this format, but this is a good place for us to start. So for our own commercials and some of our film pieces, we're going to be using this format. The practice that we're going to do in this lesson is we are going to identify these different parts of the stories together. We're going to do that with one example together, and then you'll do some of those identifying these on your own as well, practicing that. So once we practice identifying this stuff in existing stories, that's going to help us be able to design it ourselves. So this might be a little bit review for you. Maybe you've seen this in some of your other classes, but let's dive in. Let's check it out. The very beginning of the piece lets us know where are we, or where are the characters, what's going on, what are the rules of the environment, what's kind of going on. And then we have the rising action. The rising action would be what are the little issues or problems or different things that are coming up that then results to the big, would be the climax, like the big main event that happens, the big exciting thing or the big crucial problem or whatever you want to say there, the big climax. And then what happens after the climax is then we have falling action. So if, let's say this is a commercial, maybe there's all kinds of problems happening, the person uses the product, or a big problem happens and then the person uses the product, and then we see the falling action. The resolution would be how does that product actually help them or change their life for the better. If we think about like something like Harry Potter, in Harry Potter books and movies, we're setting the scene in the beginning. What's the environment like? Okay, Hogwarts, and what are the rules about the wizarding world? So that's kind of beginning there. And then we have rising action to kind of build up to then the climax. So in like the Sorcerer's Stone would be, the climax would be when they're in that like basement and Voldemort is in like that guy's head or whatever. But then like the rising action before that would be like when they fight the troll and they're in the forest and they see Voldemort the first time, so on. The falling action, and then you got the end and whatever. I'm not going to get in depth about Harry Potter, but let's look at an example together. In this lesson, we're going to check out an example, a commercial called Skittlepox. And here's some things I want you to think about. We're going to watch the whole thing through. It's just 30 seconds. Who are the main characters? What is their need or conflict? What is the climax of this story? And how is their need or conflict resolved? Or maybe it's not resolved. And then this table, this is something you are going to be using you yourself, so you will see this multiple times. We're going to practice with this, and then you'll actually use this to design and develop your own commercials and other film pieces as well. So this is just a little thing I created for you here. Yellow would be like the beginning and the rising action. So we have some questions in here, which we'll delete. How is the scene set? What steps kind of build up the action? And how do we make the viewer very aware of the conflict? Then we get to that final, like the big aha moment or the big climax, the big battle or whatever it is. And then that's in red. After that, we got the green sections here where what happens after that, or how is the story resolved or the character's life changed or those types of things. Let's check out the Skittlepox commercial, and we're thinking of those questions.
You're acting so funny. What's wrong, Billy?
I should probably tell you, this isn't just my complexion. My doctor says I have Skittles pox.
Skittles pox? Are they contagious?
I don't think so.
Contract the rainbow, taste the rainbow.
Let's start with this first section here. Is how is the scene set? Answer that. Here's what I would say is how this story starts. Is we have two kind of like awkward looking teenagers. They're just hanging out under the bleachers. That first film shot, what would you say is that first film shot in terms of how we're introduced to this environment? I would say it's either a long shot or a medium long shot. Either of those would be good answers. Let's start with identifying the easier parts of this story. So we got the beginning identified, some of the rising action. That might be a little bit more difficult to identify, and then maybe the falling action. The ending, that's quite easy for us to identify, so let's do that. How does this commercial end? Notice the message, the purpose is restated in regards to, like, we see the product again. So the product, of course, is Skittles, and then they have their slogan. What would you argue is the climax of this story? And of course, you can rewind. And what would you say is the climax of this story? And of course, you can rewind and rewatch the commercial if you need to. I would argue this section right here is going to be our climax.
Skittles pox? Are they contagious?
We started out with over the shoulder of the girl grabbing the pox off of the guy's face, and then over shoulder of the guy showing the girl eating it, and then the camera backs out a little bit, and then we can see once it backs out, it's like boom, the Skittle pox are on her, and she asks if they're contagious. So there's, they're trying to put in some humor there, and then in this red box here, that's what I'd like you to put in is just that description in terms of the girl eats the Skittle pox and gets the pox, and she asks if they're contagious. Let's clear out the rest of the questions in our yellow section here for the rising action. There's not a whole lot of rising action in this commercial. They're just kind of standing around talking. The girl is like, hey, what's going on? What's going on with you? And he says, oh, the doctor says I have Skittles pox. So that's what we can put in our yellow section, is just that they're having a conversation going back and forth, and she's asking about the Skittles pox. Your rising action section should look something like this. The girl says, hey, you look funny, what's wrong, Billy? And if we go back, that's like a over the shoulder, kind of over the guy's shoulder. It's kind of, or eye level, kind of both shots. And then the boy's like, I should probably tell you, my doctor says I have Skittle pox. And then that's a close shot of them both. Notice when we learned that when people are talking, we have two people having a conversation, that this generally is a good shot to use, like a close shot like this. And then the girl's like, Skittles pox, for like a reaction of her, and that goes back to that over the shoulder. Now notice here, this is kind of a long shot. So in terms of humor, the designers of this commercial, they're trying to make it feel a little bit awkward. So that's why it's kind of like long. They don't cut it very much. So then we got the girl reacting, Skittles pox, and then that rising action sets us up for the climax. And we didn't maybe at first expect her to like grab and eat it. That's kind of weird. Like if somebody has chicken pox, they're not going to scratch the person's face, scratch the scab and eat it. That'd be really creepy. So we're good through the climax. So let's think about what's the following action of this commercial. And there's not a whole lot, but let's think about what's the following action. For following action for this commercial, there's really only one scene. It's just a close shot of the boy kind of looking to the distance, and after the girl asks, are they contagious? The guy's like, I don't think so. So he kind of shaking his head. So that's all we have for following action is just that one little part there. So let's check it out.
Are they contagious? I don't think so.
And then notice like the timing. So in terms of humor, timing is incredibly important. That again, that shot, it's kind of long and it's kind of awkward. Again, making those two teenagers feel a little awkward, and then the situation with the Skittles box, and then boom, it goes straight into the Skittles, like taste the rainbow, contract the rainbow. So again, that humor of boom that comes in, and just the timing of that. So in terms of our following action, that's all we need there. The strategy of what we just did, I want you to think about doing that, of course, with the rest of this practice, but also with your own commercials and stories, is think about how you want it to start, think about the climax, think about how it's going to end, and then you can fill in the rest of those parts like later. That's a good strategy of how to design. You don't have to do it that way, but it's a good strategy of how to design. So what you're going to do with the rest of this practice is you're going to do that same thing that we just did, but you're going to do that for a couple other commercials. So you're going to try it on your own, and then we'll see how you did. Thanks for checking this out. I hope you enjoyed Skittles Pox.